those of you in Zoom land, if anybody does want to speak, I don't know if people are on the remote connection. If you would like to speak, raise your hand. Our wonderful AV nerd will see you and call you out so that you may speak. We're here tonight because the Conservation Advisory Council asked that this be brought to a public hearing to hear your thoughts on this proposed law governing trees. We've had several discussions in this room about it, and I felt that we should go ahead and let the public see what this is about, because that's how we gauge how you feel. That being said, this is, like I said, a proposal from a village committee. This was not something written by the village board. With that, let's get right to hearing from our residents. I think because we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, we have 13 folks that want to speak at this point. Let's try to keep our comments to about 3 minutes. I'll loosely hold you to that because it's not like everybody wants to speak. We have a huge crowd. So we'll just start this right off with Becky.
Do I stand here?
Yeah, sure. If you want to come in the front and speak, that's fine too.
I'm Becky Hart. I'm a newcomer. I bought my property in 2018. I didn't come here from downstate. I moved here from Denver and Detroit. I chose this place, and 3 generations of my family live here now. I'm here not to argue the merits of the proposed tree law, but to learn. The calculated statements of the flyer distributed yesterday prompted me to speak. I'm grateful to the longtime residents of this village who've stewarded it and its development for over 300 years. The tree ordinance proposal meets the guidelines of the New York State Environmental Quality Review Act for private property, subdivisions, wetlands, and steep slopes, and it follows the guidance of the New York Department of Environmental Conservation for municipal tree laws. Now, nobody from CAC told me this. I've spent days doing the research. Much of the new law, the 2018 law and the 2023 proposal both of them stipulate that notice must be served except in an emergency when removing trees from private lands. Much of the new tree law is outlined in the 2018 ordinance, which was passed by bipartisan village board under a Republican mayor. And both of them include a levy of lien when trees are removed from private property and the tax consequences should the village remove trees and incur expenses. This is in guidance with New York State law. So I have 2 questions that I'd like to have answered. I'm not sure whether the board is ready to answer these, or maybe this is something that has to be answered another way. What prompted the need for a new ordinance? Our tree ordinance is only 5 years old. That's pretty unusual that we need a whole new ordinance. And 2, the proposed ordinance roughly follows the guidelines of the Department of Environmental Conservation, example number 1. But I understand that wasn't consulted. So I'm just wondering, I know that other tree laws were consulted. It's been said we've been consulting from people from outside of here. I would love to know what laws were looked at and what was the guidance in writing this law. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. The question of why we need this is one I ask myself as well. I do not know specifically what laws were consulted. We have members of the CAC here this evening. Jerry, do you want to let us know which laws from which municipalities were reviewed?
We started with basically we looked for a village of comparable size to Athens. And we started with the Croton on Hudson village tree law. and then began working with that, so it doesn't really resemble it anymore. There's a lot of differences. There was a lot of permitting, paperwork, bureaucracy involved in that law, as there are with a lot of them. We wanted to make this simpler, and so, you know, as it stands, it's a rough draft that needs public input before we move beyond that. There are provisions that were provided at different points by representatives of the DEC who kind of wandered into the picture and then wandered out. You know, there's provisions in there. It's obviously going to be very contentious, but the idea is that it's a starting point to be modified. I know some people said something about fines and all of that. Those are placeholders. Caliper of trees, that's a policy decision for the village board to make, work on. We were just trying to get the ball going
Okay,
to turn it over to you.
which is, it's odd that we're at a public hearing stage then for this, it's such a rough draft. But I will continue to hear from the public. Robert Butler.
I'm assuming my questions are just gonna get, I don't want them answered because it's not the forum for answers.
Okay.
So I'm just gonna present this, and I have 2 pages of questions and comments, and I'll turn it to you, put them into the record when I'm done.
Excellent.
So section 1.1 definitions, landmark tree. I reached out to the village office to see if I could get a definition or a list, and was told they would forward that to the village board. The law says it's in the village office, so, I mean, it should be readily available. 2, trees. What if the tree in question is not a native tree to this area? Do we disregard that, or just because I'm cut it down, I'm not opposed to that? It's not native, so it should, my opinion, should go. Same section. Tree clearing. What is the basis for 10 trees? Limiting the number of trees removed based solely on the DVH, it's poor silvicultural practice. You want to make sure you have small, middle, and old age trees to develop. Section 3, duties and responsibilities of the Department Conservation Advisory Board. Big questionnaire. What qualifications are required to be a member? Why are we not allowing, but why is it proposed that everything has to be consulted through them? How much more work we're gonna add to code enforcement and to the highway department? Section 4, planting, tree removal, severe pruning. When determining or identifying what trees should be removed, many factors need to be reviewed. Obviously, the geographic region, soil type, depth of soil, bedrock, precipitation, temperatures, site contours, and root mass. Impacts of not doing this, impacts that could occur by eliminating trees of specific DVH. As I said, elimination of middle growth trees. Overall appearance, site dominated by old growth trees. And as old growth trees begin to die, canopy will forever be changed with no middle growth trees there to take over. Slope failure caused by root loss. Section 5, spacing of trees. How is it determined? I would think that determination be done by the type of trees that they are, based on canopy and root mass diameter. Not taking into consideration can negatively impact the shape and size of the canopy and minimize the root structure. Planting too close together can also prevent sunlight from reaching the road, blocking out streetlights. Section 15, purpose. What are historic values of native trees? I know when I was on the original committee, the tree committee, and that was my big thing. Historic tree and, I cannot remember what the other one was. What was it? No, it was, I'll have to think, I just can't remember. Section 17, tree removal permit required approving authority. Again, the landmark trees aren't clearly defined unless you contact the village office. Section 18, permit application. Section refers to section 16. I don't see a section 16 in the law. I went back to the village code, I don't see a section 16 in there. So, want to look at that. In the permit application, you touch on the stormwater prevention plan, which is also called the SWIP. That typically applies to projects that are of an acre or more. It doesn't pertain to straight cutting down of trees unless you're clearing, grading, and excavating. So to just remove trees, you don't need a SWIP. And if you do have a SWIP, who's gonna monitor it? Because you need to be trained to monitor it. And it's very boring to monitor, trust me. In the permit application, section 18, where did the 50 acres come from? Because in the village of Athens, there's 5 parcels of land that are 50 acres or more. Middle ground flats, parcel owned by Sleepy Hollow, parcel owned by Nymo, 55 acres on Spartanburg Road, and 86 acres up on 385. Section 19, conditions of granting permit, complete plans for the restoration of the site after tree removal. Wood shall be certified by a recognized tree expert. Who's gonna flip the cost for the tree expert to review this? And then sections 20 through 28, just a general thing is, why is the community or the Conservation Advisory Committee included in all these decisions? What makes them qualified to make these decisions? So that's all I got, and I'll leave these with you.
I
when
appreciate
leave.
that, thank you. Next, we have David Leggio.
Yeah, hi. I have 2 questions. Is this local law that you're discussing, first of all, is it being voted on for enactment tonight? No?
We want to hear what everyone has to say tonight.
Okay, that's part A. Part B would be if it's just information like I'm hearing. The other thing is, instead of the village board voting to enact it, why isn't it being put out to the whole public to vote during an election? And let the public decide.
Tal, what are the parameters of getting something on a ballot like this?
Unfortunately, we don't have what other states have as far as propositions and things like that at the town and village level. There are a very limited number of things that are either a permissive referendum or a mandatory referendum. An enactment of legislation is not one of them. So it's a legislative body decision to make. We're not even authorized to do it even if we wanted to.
I would love to, but it's not legal, unfortunately. I'd love to let you guys decide.
Well, those are my 2 questions.
Okay, thank you, Dave. Next, we have Richard Green.
I'm opposed to this. I live at 3 North Montgomery Street. I've been here for 23 years. Any of the trees that are on my property, I put there. I don't think the village should have to tell me how to manicure my property, and anybody is welcome to drive by and see that I do try to be a good steward of my property in the village. And I just don't think I need another organization to tell me how to control my property. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Next, we have, I'm sorry, I'm not good at reading. James Miller? Does that say James?
I support the same thing that Mr. Green. I want to know some answers. I want to hear what the forum is here first, formulating the questions.
Okay, excellent, thank you. Next up, we have Hannah Munson.
Hi, Hannah. My question is, we just moved here 2 months ago, bought the property, and as we were closing on the house, 2 of the trees were removed by the city. And we were wondering, who's gonna be replacing those trees? Is this our responsibility, or the town's going to be replacing? And if we have to do it, what's allowed to be planted there instead of removed trees?
Oh, I don't know the specifics of your property. I do know if the village had cut down a tree, that was a village tree, and we do go through a process of deciding, you know, it was obviously dangerous or diseased. If you want to send an email to the village clerk, which is voaclerk@yahoo. You can find them on the website as well.
Okay.
Just send an email with your specific property, and I'll get you better answers specific to you about when that decision was made and why and what the next steps are.
Yeah, we just been informed that the trees were diseased
Yeah.
and they had to be removed.
We We had quite a few this past year. I think they were probably all planted at about the same time, and, you know, people have been asking me on the street, why are people cutting down so many trees? I said, they have to go, you know? They don't last forever, but, yeah, just shoot an email to the clerk, they'll get it to me, and I'll get back to you with a better explanation that's more specific to your property.
Thank you.
No problem. Next, we have Frank Petitella.
My name is Frank Petitella.
Hi,
I
Frank.
want to ask this board one question. What gives you people the right to vote for all us people that are taxpayers here in Athens? Why you five have the right and none of us have a chance to vote on this? We should have a chance to vote on his law, okay? And it's not fair. And that's what's happening. You people have too much power. We should have a right to vote,
Frank, we were elected.
okay?
We're elected officials.
Whether you're elected or not, it's not right.
We're elected officials. You're here tonight to voice your opinion on the law, not to ask why we're sitting here. If your opinion is something that you'd like to state, we will take that into consideration.
I'm just asking you, why do you have the right? I'm a taxpayer. Why do I even have to come here and vote for my rights? Because this guy wants to take the trees. You want to take the trees down, but I got to have permission, and I pay tax on that land, and you have the right to tell me whether I can or can't. That's not fair.
We
That's
did
all I
not-
have to say.
Okay, thank
Okay?
you, Frank.
It's not right what you're doing.
We haven't done anything, Frank. Next, we'd like to hear from John Cameron. Hi, John.
I've been a resident of Athens for 52 years now, I think. Is that how old I am? Yeah. I've worked 40 hours a week for 29 years now, 39 years? I don't know. I saved up money and I bought a house in Athens. I've lived in Athens my entire life. I pay my taxes. I don't think anybody should have anything to say about what I do on my property as far as grooming, trees, whatever. It's my property. This nation is a nation of freedoms. If I wanted to live and have a neighbor and have the committee tell me what I want to do on my property, I would have purchased a house in Sleepy Hollow. The reason I didn't purchase a house in Sleepy Hollow because I didn't want to deal with that bullshit, okay? And this is bullshit. I need anybody to tell me what I need to do or not need to do on my property. And now, if I want to cut down a tree, I have to get a permit and pay somebody else to give me permission to do something on my property. It's the most asinine thing I've heard since having to pay to get blueprints to put $800 or $800 deck in your house, $2,000 for blueprints. It's asinine. It's unbelievable. My question goes back to the 2018 law that was passed that I never answered at that meeting. Is I keep hearing about village trees. These are village trees. These are village trees. Okay. Does the village cover the cost for sidewalk and driveway replacement when the village trees do damage to it, or is it the homeowner's responsibility? Because if it's truly the village trees, shouldn't they be covering that cost also? That was never answered, right? But there's nobody from the CAC down there helping Joe Brown fix his driveway or pull up his sidewalk stones and cut the roots out, but it's a village tree. I think that needs to be addressed. Also, thank you for your time.
Thank you, John. You know, I had that same thing about the sidewalks and I think it's case by case basis. Yeah. We'll look into that because I had a similar thought in thinking about trees so much. Next we have Michael Borfit.
All right, so I don't see any trees being like cut down unnecessarily in the village. There's a hell of a lot more trees here now than there were 50 years ago. You know, it doesn't make any sense. And that's it.
All right, thank you, Michael. Next we have Corey Brady.
So I live 6 Constantine Court. Michael Borfit's planted a couple trees there. This is gonna get passed. I'm gonna cut them all down before it gets passed.
I
wanna
planted
know-
4 there. I'll call and check them.
I wanna know, my neighbor has a cottonwood tree. I don't like that cottonwood tree.
They're
Can I
big, but-
file a nuisance grievance or whatever they're gonna call it against that cottonwood tree? Can I force him to cut that tree down? That's my question. Can other property owners force other property owners to manipulate their property?
I didn't see anything in this law that would indicate that, no.
Well,
And I
there's
don't
nuisance
think,
permits. There's a nuisance grievance within this law, is there not? And the other thing is, I'd like the board to go on record whether they're for or against it. That way, when we do go to vote, we know how to vote based on our feelings on it.
I agree with you, yeah. Anything
If I
else?
grab one more minute.
Sure, John.
I also believe that if any board member is also a member on the CAC, they should be forced to abstain from voting on this subject. It's conflict of interest.
Okay.
All right.
Understood. Now we're going to hear from Leo Palmatier.
Okay, a lot of my feelings have been covered in general tonight, but one that I was asked, I'll even go to the first question. Why do we need a law? There is something on the books. We go through this throughout levels of government crazily. You know, we need to update and just enforce the laws that are on the books. Let's start with that, number one. Second thing is, somebody else asked, what are the qualifications for this? What is it? I don't even know what CAC means. I forget.
It's the Conservation Advisory Council.
Conservation Advisory Committee. What were their qualifications, and what makes this group you're a member of so confident that they should be the arbiters of what somebody does on their property? Is there like a level of minimum level of education that is required to be a member of that committee, number one? And is that education specific to trees and roots and soil and so on and so forth? It is overreaching. The board is overreaching right here. And I am certainly 100% in support with the opposition, and that's all we've heard thus far this evening. It's onerous, it's expensive. It's expensive from the standpoint of permit applications, waiting on the village and the CAC to give their blessing for me to excavate or do or build. There is a statement in there, if I'm not mistaken, that says even in the preparation of your site plan, the CAC, the authority that rented to them by the village, they'll take a look at it and see if maybe you can take that tree down, or if you can find another place to put your house on your property. That's unbelievable. That is unbelievable that your group would even look at this as a draft law. And there are a number more things, but I will say this, you've heard me say it before, stop giving your authority away to groups of people who have no obligation to the citizens. You are the elected officials, so you have the nerve. You make the calls. That's why we hired you. We elected you, not to pass off responsibilities to committees. So don't give it to them. I don't want us to, we got to go through the planning board, to the village board, to the CAC, to whatever professional they may hire, blah, blah, blah. It's absolutely overreaching, it's onerous, it's burdensome, it's costly, and it is very unfair to the property owners and taxpayers in this community.
Thank you, Leo. Next up, we're going to hear from Carol Feaster.
I was just going to comment, the village trees, because they're in the village easement. The reason they're called village trees is because they're in the easement of the street.
Yes, yeah, that's defined
I don't
in the
think a lot of
2018
people
law.
know that.
Yeah, and then we did an inventory, so you'll see, as you walk around the village, the ones with the little metal tags, those are village trees. That's village property, so that's a whole different ball of wax. So last on our list of signed up speakers is Michael Black. Michael?
This could be an hour long.
First of all, congratulations on your turnout.
I had a feeling it would be big.
I had no idea. I'm very impressed. I have some rather difficult things to say to you this evening. But please know that what I say is intended as constructive criticism. I'm not being personal, and above all, please know I am going to speak truth to you. Leaders lead by example. In the last 4 decades that I have been here, the example set by the Athens Village Board with respect to trees has been unstable. One administration planted more trees than anyone, as well as caring for trees in need. Another cut down more trees than any other, seemingly to spite tree advocates.
Because your CAC said it was okay to cut them down.
Let him speak.
Trees were planted for people seen as, quote, friends, unquote, while at the same time they were denying trees to others who requested them. An opportunity to engage with Central Hudson Electric was bungled. The board member who was assigned to be the contact failed on 3 separate occasions to even show up for an appointment. And the result is that the street tree environment became increasingly hostile to street trees. A board member recently bulldozed the root zone of 2 large street trees and then had the village remove the rest at public expense. Here's how this proposal could be improved. And let me say unequivocally, I am in support of the idea of cultivating and maintaining trees in the village. I personally have planted at least as many, if not more, than any private person in the village over the 4 decades I've been here, and taken care of them at my own expense. Instead of a punitive approach, the village board should be encouraging people to care for trees by setting a good example. I would suggest that perhaps the village ought to be asking property owners for permission. At very least notifying them if they have intent of doing something with trees. And we won't talk about the village paying fees to private owners, but that's with a sense of humor, okay? Forgive me.
Wouldn't that be illegal?
Yes, and as far as I know, I've been on the village board, what, how many years now? We have never paid anybody privately anything to do with trees. We have never taken them.
That was tongue-in-cheek.
We don't even pay to have the trees cut down. We call the county, they
Right.
take care of the service.
I mean, I don't know
down.
where your facts are coming from, but it's totally wrong.
So that's
I
how
met
much your
with
tax
Central
dollars
Hudson
get
years
paid to
ago,
cut down trees.
and we rode around to every tree in the village to see which ones were still good, which ones probably had to come down. This was, I don't know, Marla was on the board then. Marla and I rode around with Central Hudson. So please, yes, please don't be giving false information here.
I am speaking truth to you this
This is
evening.
not true. That was irresponsible.
May I continue, please?
Sure.
Regulation of proposed new developments is good. This could have helped deal with the recent botched tree destruction across from Brick Road. We here are where urban flight wants to land. We either protect it or lose it.
Why didn't you purchase it?
Beyond my budget.
Well, then don't worry about what they want to do. They bought it, they're paying the taxes on it, it ain't none of your business.
All right, we'll do this as long as it's productive.
Don't say nothing.
I'm nearing completion, if I may, please. Not counting the interruptions, I think I'm still within my 3 minutes. Police administration of tree restrictions seems perilous. In light of the current police culture crisis, it seems tone deaf for the village board to be expanding police functions into civil functions. If you're considering going that way, at very least, you might be better off with an incremental adoption rather than rushing into telling people what they can do on their own land. Forcing punitive regulation and fees onto previously existing private owners without first setting a better example yourselves seems like overreach. It is going to meet resistance, and it will invite adversarial action against the village board. The village needs to engage with Central Hudson to rein in destructive pruning and encourage restoration of our street trees. Trees are living things, they need care. There needs to be an annual budget for village trees, including a care plan and a removal plan and a replacement plan. And last is a small question, if you can tell us, what is the future procedure for adopting a tree ordinance?
The same as any law, we would hear public comment, and then the board would decide whether or not we're going to vote on the law. Okay, thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Thank God. I can't
I
see
have
who.
one kind of simple question. Can someone outline the difference, can someone outline the difference between the old law and the new proposed law? Because we have a law that's on the books, right?
Yeah.
So what are the differences? Jerry.
I was just going to see if Jerry Bunting from the CAC would like to speak, and that seems like a good segue for you.
Well, I'm not signed up to speak, so I wasn't going to.
That's the end of our list, if you would like to speak.
Okay, well, just to address a few.
Can you speak louder, sir?
The difference between the old law and the new law is that the old law dealt only with street trees. The new law clarifies the street tree law, but then has a second part that was designed to deal with the situation that occurred across from Brick Road. Okay, that's where it came from. To address some of the other comments, and you have to forgive me, I've gone deaf in this ear, so I can't control the volume of my voice. There was a comment that raised about street trees being a problem for driveway entrances and curbs and the like, and sidewalks. The CAC has been very proactive in going out and recommending the removal of trees that cause problems. Several months ago, a homeowner on North Franklin Street came to the CAC and said, hey, there's a tree that's lifting up the sidewalk, and I'm concerned about future problems with my foundation. We all went to look at this tree. It was perfectly healthy. There was nothing wrong with it, but it was the wrong tree in the wrong place, and we recommended to the village that the tree be removed, and the tree was promptly removed. Okay, just to clarify something about the CAC, we're not like the zoning board or the planning board. We can't make determinations that have any force whatsoever. We are an advisory board. We can suggest, recommend, offer help with this, but that's all we can do. Everything else has to be done by the planning board and ultimately by the village trustees. You know, and to clarify one other thing, think that, oh, it's a bunch of radical environmentalists. I work for a petroleum company as their attorney, okay? If you've noticed over the past 2 or 3 years, there's been a lot of street trees being cut down. They were cut down because they were at the end of their life. I have a background in arboriculture and in trees. Am I an expert? No. We have a trained, licensed arborist from down in Cornwall that comes up every few years and does an inventory. And he will raise red flags and yellow flags and say, you really should keep an eye on that silver maple, or you really should keep an eye on that. And we do. And when a tree looks like it's failing, it goes. We don't try and say, oh, maybe we could save it, maybe we could have a drum circle and make it feel better. No, darn thing goes. That's how we operate. But we're not sentencing the tree cut. We recommend to the village, and the village decides whether to have the tree removed or to leave it or to prune. Lastly, with regards to Central Hudson, this is a very important thing with regard to street trees. Over the past decades, before the power lines were even there, trees were planted and they have grown into the power lines. Arborists, any tree service in this area in Green County, they do not want to have to work around those power lines. They will refuse. So whenever it's a power line issue, we have to call Central Hudson. Unfortunately, Central Hudson, they're doing this in volume. They have so many problems, so many trees in other communities they have to deal with. They kind of do a butcher job on the tree. You can't help that. The people who say, oh, don't plant under power lines, just don't. Even low-growing trees like crab apples are eventually going to be a problem. In terms of maintenance, planting, and everything like that, our certified arborists just presented a proposed tree maintenance plan and updated inventory last week. I haven't even read it yet. I'm not sure the board has seen it. It's public. It's going to be publicly available so people can look at it. But that's it in a nutshell. Getting back to the ordinance itself, we started with Croton and then began eliminating stuff. Many communities, if not most communities, have lists of trees that can be planted on the streets and not planted. New York State itself, even though our arborist disagrees with us, has a list of prohibited trees. We left all of that out. You're free to plant whatever you want, although I really would recommend not planting willows. That's where we are. We drafted a law. I refer to it as a rough draft. That's really not an accurate term. We tried to make sure it was all spell checked and legible. But again, it has to be reviewed by our village attorney. He's an expert in municipal law. I'm an attorney, but I'm not. It has to be looked at by the village board. You can adopt some of it, all of it, parts of it. You could take it and use it to amend the 2018 law. But the concerns raised here by everybody are, in my opinion, 100% valid, whether you're for it or against it. We live in a community where you don't want to see what happened at Brick Road, or at least have an out-of-town investor at least go through a process before doing that. And lastly, people are saying, oh, it's going to tell me what I can do on my land. Yes, it does. We live in a village. But that law, some of the most stringent provisions affect me just as well. If that law was in effect 2 years ago, I would have broken it.
Who's we?
That's the point.
Wait, hold on. Who's we? Because I would have loved to have seen 15 $500,000 homes go in up where the trailers, see how the trailers are, and that tax revenue come into our village. I would love to have had tax revenue come into that.
And we have two code enforcement officers.
You speak for yourself. Don't speak for anybody else in this room but yourself. The word "we" should not come out of your mouth.
Our code enforcement officers.
We're speaking.
Officer.
Okay, they're part-time, they're overwhelmed, and now this is going to be added to what their jobs are, and they're having a difficult time managing
The
it.
problem with Brick Road is the people in Brick Road don't want to see the houses across the street.
You got that right.
Okay, so now we're just having a conversation in the back of the room. It's a public hearing and I can't hear you. Peter.
Gentlemen,
Everyone else in the village gets.
Where are you going to put
I've asked Peter Alberti to speak now, please.
gentlemen in the back.
If this proposed law is passed, who is going to enforce it?
That's my question.
That's the big question, isn't it?
No, it's not. The big question is, should you interfere with people's private property rights? I can tell you. That's the big question.
Oh, there are several big questions.
Can I tell you who it
That's
needs
right.
to be? It can't be the cops, can't be the police department, can't be the village board, because you guys make the laws. It's gonna be code enforcement officer, plural, one. enforcement officer in a municipality, village or town or city. So who is the code enforcement officer that's gonna enforce this? I'm asking you.
They probably won't because there's not enough time that is
That's-
allotted.
no, that's-
They're also
that-
building
that-
code
that
enforcement
doesn't-
officers.
That's not kosher with me. The code enforcer has to enforce this. Nobody else can.
If
There's-
this law
You
passes.
can't make
Peter.
excuses because they're part-time or they don't have the
If
time.
it passes, if it passes. John? one more.
I think, I request that the board have a show of hands of opposition against pro, and just so that they can see visually the number of people who are for or against this proposal.
I asked that earlier, and
Yeah.
you just kind of blew me off.
I didn't blow you off, we're not there yet. Wait for it.
We're at a meeting.
Yes, we
You have
are.
to have some sort of opinion on it.
I absolutely do. So if everybody in the audience is finished, yeah, go ahead, Dave.
So, actually adjoins this, I own almost 8 acres.
Yes.
I have almost like 8 building lots at potential that were supposed to be there. Now, it's kind of hard for me because I have trees along a lot of people's houses. Maybe they don't like me. So they say, that tree, that, right? So you guys come in, you say they have to go. Maybe I don't have the money to do it, so you guys cut them down. It goes on my taxes. My tax bill is $25,000. I can't afford that, what happens? And then there's penalties on top of that and everything else. Also, another thing, if I could develop my property, that would give you guys an extra $35,000 a year. 10 trees a year, I mean, that'll take me, I'll be dead. Another thing is, I wanted to clear, because I have like a lot of nice oak trees, maple trees, silver, birches, a lot of nice trees. I hate pine trees. I would keep a couple pine trees, but they destroy my cars, and I have a lot of them, probably like 60 of them I could cut in one park.
I'll bring a sawmill.
Okay. But my thing is, like, what do you, like, I want to look at the nice trees and make a yard, but that kind of prevents me from doing that. That kind of stinks. And I'd love to like thin it out and make it look nicer, but I can't.
Do it before it gets passed. I'll come help you.
I don't
I got a couple saws.
Thank you, Dave. I appreciate everybody's comments this evening. I have a few of my own. Okay.
Question is, Steve.
Yep.
I only live about a mile from here, here in Turnpike, I have more than 50 acres, in 3 lots, 3 basic tax ID numbers. One is a 46-acre orchard. It's been an orchard for, I don't know, 100 years in the Brooks Farm used to be. How's that governed under this law? Do I have the chance, like I've been doing for, I've lived here since 1985. I grew up here and had the opportunity to buy that. I've cultivated that land. I've spent thousands of dollars on equipment to do that. How does that affect, how does the law affect that?
That's another one of those questions that remain unanswered with this law. There's a few points I'd like to make. Those of you who haven't been to village board meetings much in the last couple of years have not heard what I've had to say about this. I want to be respectful to the people who did put in hard work on this. But like many of you asked this evening, I don't know why we would need this. I feel that this assigned responsibility for trees to boards and departments that aren't trained for that. Code enforcement is building code enforcement, they're not tree code enforcement. I found myself asking what it would be the cost. What do we not pay for so we can pay to enforce this law? Water and sewer improvements, paving the roads.
Yes.
It reads like it was written by people who don't understand how our local government functions or what its limitations are, because we are limited in what we can enforce and what we want to even have dominion over. honestly. It's a lot of extra responsibility for code enforcement. Who's gonna pay for that additional training? That's gonna cost money. I mean, the amount of cost for them to take the training to get to be code enforcement officers was quite steep. And, you know, I wouldn't be comfortable with them not having a base of tree knowledge in order to have these responsibilities as well. There were a lot of moments in this law, little spots where it says in consultation with the CAC directly from either code enforcement or planning board, skipping the village board entirely. The village board should have the say on whether or not the CAC is consulted on anything. That's how it was set up. It is an advisory board. This law is their advice. We do not have to take it. I just want to make that clear. I had this public hearing because I've been in meetings for the better part of my term, asking these questions and bringing up my issues with this, and yet they want to have a public hearing. And I thought, that's what we do, right? We go to the public and we ask, how do you feel about this? What do you think is going on? When we wanted to build a DPW building, we had everybody come down. Do you want the big one, the small one? What should we do? You helped us decide. We got the big building. It's good. When we wanted to buy the fire truck, everybody came down. You know, this is what we do here, and I hear you. And I would be lying if I said I didn't agree with you. I just don't know. I understand that this was all born of the incident on Brick Row 2 years ago. I think I've been mayor for about 3 days before I started getting all the calls about that. And I was like, shit, what have I done? I don't like what that person did, but they did not break the law. If the concern, if this was all born of concern about developers clear cutting, then we should have some sort of amendment or something to our existing tree law that deals with developers being able to clear cut without going through any sort of permitting process for the village. But it'll have to be to scale that makes sense, not something that's gonna keep our neighbor from caring for his apple orchard. I just think that this is misguided. I think it's premature. I don't think this reflects our community. I don't think it reflects what our community wants. I think it discounts the wisdom of our community. It assumes we're all gonna, fuck up. And we're not. And if we do, hopefully we help each other out. So I would like to ask for a motion to not adopt this law.
I will.
Thank you, Gail. Rob, thank you. All those in favor of not pursuing this law, please say aye. Aye. Okay, so that was 4. I'm an aye. That's a unanimous vote. Now,
Do we have anybody objecting to that? I didn't.
no, everybody said yes.
Well, I mean, on the village board, the people that I can elect. You can run.
Everybody agrees we are not adopting this law. So there, I told you to wait for it.
Good job.
Good job, Mayor.
Yes.
You can incentivize people to plant trees by offering a tax credit. And then the village does not do that right now. They tax you on the trees that you have in the property.
All right. Now, one thing the next thing I was going to say in conjunction with, we're done with this law. Street trees, we have a law governing them already. If there are improvements or amendments that need to be made to that law, I invite the CAC to propose them to the village board, and we will look at them, review them, and perhaps adopt them with your input on our timeline. Yes,
One quick
Jean.
180. So, great, and from this moment on, we will just use the 2018 law as it is written, as the law now.
Yeah, with the bipartisan village board at the time. Some folks here were on the board at the time. When this came up, I reread it and I said, you know, this is a good law.
Right. I think everyone should read it.
Read it again.
Read it.
You have anything that you think, always feel free to send an email, come to a meeting. I'm very open to hearing people out. Susan?
Hi, I just have to say that, the CAC was sort of given this thing to look at. It's not like, oh my God, we decided to rewrite. I'm sort of upset that we put a lot of earnest effort into trying to make the fairest thing, and that, people read part of it and react to it, when in actuality, nothing is that.
Susan, I've read it like 100 times, and I had the same reaction every time. But I hear you, and that's why I didn't want to disrespect the work that went into it, because I understand you did it with the best of intentions. But I think it was May or so of 21 where I got handed the Croton on Hudson law and asked if we could bring it to a public hearing, and I had to say, that's not going to happen. So I'm sitting here to forward the community's agenda, not my personal agenda. So I think with that, we can close the public hearing unless anyone has any final remarks.
I'd like to hear a little bit more of what she was trying to say.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, I thought you were finished, Susan.
If you don't mind, thank you.
Well, I'm just saying that I think a lot of people did have a reaction to what happened on Brick Row. It seemed almost malicious to knock all those trees down with no intent immediately. Nonetheless, that was what I think everybody looking at it would feel badly about. And so there was nothing in town, there were no village ordinances regarding a buffer between a development property and the residents nearby. And so part of what we were looking at, in my estimation, was to have something that created that kind of thing, like something in place, aside from chasing after the guy who's never gonna pay the fines.
Yeah.
Something in place prior to that kind of thing. So,
But you know the story of
Can I ask you a
Icarus.
question? What happened to the trees they cut down to build Brick Road?
I don't know.
But again, I understand.
So what is the developer that cut those trees? Wanted to build exactly.
Let her finish her statement.
I understand the intention, and I didn't like what happened at Brick Row either. I don't mean to make light of it, I really don't. But this, what we came up with in response was a huge overreach. So, yeah. So, let's take the law we have and see what we can do to maybe prevent or be able to deal with something like that, and so it doesn't happen in the future again. One more.
I just want to say this, it's not a black and white issue with Brick Row. Now there's a kind of a nice wetland down where there were trees, so, okay, it's great. But I think the thing is that you don't want to have somebody running in, and he sold all those trees to B&B Forest Products because he doesn't have any money. He's scrounging for money, and it negatively affected us a little bit. We lost some big, nice shade trees that were keeping our front of our houses cool. I have a chainsaw mill with a 66-inch bar. I cut down trees. I'm a woodworker, all this. I just don't think that maybe what you had suggested earlier is like some kind of amendment so that you can't have some developer who's got a large parcel to just come in before he's got permits to do anything, or her, and just cut willy-nilly. Dude here who's got these house sites, everything that I read, because I have trees on my property that I want to take down, and I, looked at that law. Nobody has said what the difference between the old law and the new law really is.
The new
And
law,
so I don't understand
the
why
new law
anybody
governs
really has an
private
opinion.
property. The new law would govern private property. The old law pertains to street.
So I think the new law is maybe a suggestion.
The new law
It
is
shouldn't
done.
even be voted on.
No, we did. We voted not. We voted to get.
So
It's DOA.
the idea of an amendment to sort of, have a developer who has the idea to like do a bunch of clear cutting, it's not a bad idea.
Yeah. With that,
I
I'm
think that
gonna
would help
close the public
everybody
hearing.
in the village.
Any further comments about suggestions for how we move forward can be sent to you.
You have to call,
Yeah,
call a forest ranger to come out and survey before you do something.
Can I get a motion to close the public hearing? Thank you, Rob. And thank you, Stefan, seconds. All those in favor of closing the public hearing? Thank you. Please stay with us.